The film opens outside the Bloom household on the night of Bloomsday. The house we used it's nothing like that described in Joyce's Ulysses, but when we were looking for locations, I spotted this house, and as soon as I saw it, I said, this is where the Blooms live. The bedroom scenes were all shot in studio, but I think that Mervyn Rowe, the production designer, and his team created an amazing set. It looks and feels so real. We can hear Molly's voice, and of course this is part of Molly Bloom's famous soliloquy from the very last chapter of the novel. One of the key features of Joyce's Ulysses is that it is full of interweaving connections and links. And two of these strands are introduced when Molly Bloom catches her husband Leopold writing a letter. The letter is to a lady called Martha, and the only reason Molly went in was to tell Bloom about Paddy Digname's death. It's worth mentioning that Driscoll, who was a scullery maid that Bloom was looking at, will reappear later on in the courtroom scene. And this is just another one of those links I was talking about earlier. The idea of having Molly talk directly to the audience was always at the back of my mind, but I didn't include it in the production schedule until we were actually filming. There were many reasons why I wanted Molly to talk to the audience herself. On a practical or a pragmatic level, I realised that we couldn't just have voiceover for Molly's soliloquy. We needed to break it up somehow. I also wanted the audience to really engage with Molly, and I think her pieces to camera work really well. The main reason for this, of course, is that Angeline Ball is such a wonderful actress, and she really added life, humanity and depth to the character of Molly. I think the whole idea of using Molly's soliloquy at the beginning of the film works really well. Of course, we return to the same moment in time at the end of the film, but I think that the opening helps the audience in that they learn a lot about the relationship between Molly and Bloom, about Molly's affair with Boylan, without having it forced down their throats. The other thing worth mentioning is that if we didn't begin with part of Molly's soliloquy, then we really wouldn't get to meet Molly until the very end of the film, and I don't think this would work very well. A lot of people have said to me that the film feels quite modern, even though it is set in 1904. And I think that the main reason for this is that Joyce's language and his imagination are modern and in a sense timeless. One of the things we have to remember is that when Joyce wrote Ulysses, he revealed for the first time in English literature the fundamental truth of human emotion and the way in which our minds work. It is not a case of logical progression, but rather a fluid mix of streaming, interweaving and counteracting connections. One of the other questions I'm often asked is why there is no nudity in the film. And the main reason for this is that I think nudity can be a real distraction. The opening title sequence is quite interesting because it contains 3 scenes that we filmed for a completely different reason. There is a shot of Leopold Bloom leaving the house, a shot of Molly Bloom buying some fish, and a shot of Stephen Dedalus. These scenes were shot for the end of the film because we had an idea that we would show the audience what happened on the day after Bloomsday. But like some things in the film, this idea didn't work as well as we planned, so we used the shots for the opening sequence instead. A lot of people have also asked me about the title of the film. Is it Bloom spelled B-L-O-O-M, or is it Bloom spelled B-L, full stop M, as it appears in the opening titles? The truth is that we always wanted to call the film Bloom. But when Laura Brooks, our graphic designer, came back to me with the opening titles, she had used a little trick of replacing the O's with commas and full stops, and I loved it. So we have kept with the BL, full stop M for the opening titles, but for all our advertising and promotional material, we stick with the correct title being BLOOM, or Bloom. I found the opening scene between Stephen Dedalus and Buck Mulligan very difficult. It's from the first chapter in the novel, and of course it sets the tone for the relationship between Dedalus and Mulligan. In fact, I remember when I first met Hugh O'Connor, who plays the role of Stephen Dedalus, his first questions were about this very scene. Myself and Hugh discussed the character of Stephen for a long time, and we decided to avoid the traditional interpretation of Stephen Dedalus as being simply a dark and obsessive character, and instead we decided to present Stephen in a more rounded way, and that this would allow us to reveal a broader sense of who Stephen Dedalus really was and what he stood for. In Joyce's Ulysses, this scene takes place on top of the Martello Tower in Sandycove on the south side of Dublin. But this area, it's now very built up, there's a car ferry close by, and it's very busy. Also, I wanted to film somewhere unusual, somewhere strange, wild, somewhere which would reflect the characters or nature of Mulligan, Dedalus and Haynes. The location we chose was on an island, Dalkey Island, off the south coast, and not that far from Sandycove. I think that this location gives us a much better sense of who these people were in terms of the place they lived. And by the way, because we were on an island, we had to transport everything and everyone across by boat, and we only had one day to shoot 2 long scenes.